Prime Minister, sit down. Prime Minister, I'm not going to be challenged. You may be the Prime Minister of this country, but in this House, I'm in charge, and we're going to carry on. End of that. Case done.
大家好，我係阿 Ben。可能大家耐唔耐喺新聞或者我個 Facebook page 度都有留意過英國下議院嘅辯論，好多時都會出現妙問妙答嘅情況。就算睇戲都會見過，英國下議院可以話世上最嘈嘅議會，不論係執政黨或者反對黨，對發言不滿或者認同，都會出現歡呼喝彩或者大聲插嘴。部分議員亦都會無啦啦彈起身。有人會覺得英國嘅議會文化嘈吵，亦有人會話佢哋有時嘅辯論言辭幼稚，好似小學生鬧交咁。
Order, I say to the Children's Minister, try to calm down and behave like an adult, and if you can't, if it's beyond you, leave the chamber, get out, we'll manage without you.
不論大家點睇都好，我就覺得如果將呢啲嘅問答配上粵語字幕，其實都幾得意。不過因為文字篇幅有限，往往只係睇到一兩句，大家可能未必了解當中嘅提問嘅背景資料。特別係首相傳統每個星期三嘅答問大會，即係 Pmq， 除咗可以睇到首相面對各種題目以一敵百之外，其實從中都可以知道嗰個星期國民嘅關注議題，同埋反對黨對執政黨嘅攻擊目標。從食花生嘅角度，當然係想睇反對黨點樣借嗰個星期嘅議題向首相攻擊，而首相係點樣防守。另一方面，正因為現任首相 Boris Johnson 唔算係典型英式文質彬彬嘅精英政客，佢嘅回應往往都係充滿驚喜。所以如果了解當中嘅議題背景，除咗可以了解嗰個星期英國嘅焦點之外，更加明白佢哋究竟講緊乜、噓乜、讚乜、笑乜，免得大家跟唔到劇情。先交代下上個星期三嘅提問背景。響 PMQ 開始前嘅開場白當中，第一件係保守黨議員 Jamie Wallace 響社交媒體發表聲明，承認自己 LGBT 嘅身份之餘，更表明自己準備進行變性手術。其實英國議會內各黨都有唔少已經出櫃嘅議員，不過以跨性別身份出現嘅 Jamie Wallace 就係第一個，所以無論首相同工黨黨魁都先讚揚佢嘅勇氣。另外一件首相要交代嘅事就係政府獨立調查委員會公布咗 NHS 醫院20年嚟對孕婦分娩服務嘅失誤同埋疏忽，導致至少201個嬰兒因為難產而喪生，接近100個腦部受損。傳統上本來反對黨黨魁應該係排頭位第一個向首相提問嘅，不過今日就交咗俾另一位保守黨議員先問關於烏克蘭嘅政策。關於英國議會嘅傳統，要留意嘅係英國嘅議會傳統係唔會講名，淨係會用職位或者選區名稱去稱呼對方。理論上提問同回應嗰個都唔會直接對話，兩個都係同議長講嘢。600幾個議員當中，希望喺當日問問題嘅就會事前向議長提交意向，議長就會以抽籤嘅方式揀可以提問嘅議員，每個人只可以問一題。呢個就係點解大家見到發言之後總會有其他議員彈起身嘅原因，就係另一個議會傳統。嗰啲就係事前冇被議長揀出嚟提問嘅議員，希望用企起身嘅方式吸引議長注意，即場容許當日發言問問題。最大反對黨黨魁除咗有提問優先權之外，仲可以連續問6個問題。理論上首相係唔會知道提問嘅內容，不過黨友嘅提問就當然會預先話俾首相知，而對家嘅提問就要靠首相或者內閣官員嘅幕僚估啦。正因為反對黨黨魁可以問6條問題，就算首相或者官員嘅幕僚大概估到問乜，有時對方都會因應回應去追擊，所以講求急才、即時反應同埋政治計算。而上星期三工黨黨魁嘅目標就係攻擊政府對物價急升減稅嘅政策，之後就射咗去派對門嘅醜聞，因為警察 已經開始向當日違反限聚令嘅人士發出罰款通知。另外，大家可以睇下咧工黨黨魁同首相之間嘅講嘢風格，因為工黨黨魁本身係御用大律師，所以提問同串人嘅方式都好似上庭盤問證人咁。咁另一方面，為咗令自己唔好變成法庭證人，首相好多時就刻意唔跌入事實或者數字嘅圈套，用政治辯論或者轉換話題嘅方式回應。好啦，唔講咁多啦，去片啦。最後大家覺得唔錯嘅，唔該啦，都係嗰啲老土嘢啦，唔重複啦。
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will have read the statement today from my honourable friend, the member for Bridgend. And I know that the House stands with you and will give you the support that you need to live freely as yourself. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Donna Ockenden and her whole team for the compassionate approach she's taken throughout this distressing review of maternity care at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospitals NHS Trust. Every woman giving birth has the right to a safe birth, and my heart, therefore, goes out to the families for the distress and suffering that they've endured. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, will be making an oral statement this afternoon setting out the government's response. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While our focus is rightly on Ukraine, the Prime Minister will be aware of the great concern many people have across the Baltic states. So can he outline the role the Joint Expeditionary Force can play in countering Russian aggression and improving defensive posture for our allies in the Baltics?
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much. And the Joint Expeditionary Force, or the JEF, is an increasingly important grouping of the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, the Dutch and ourselves, who are committed to working together in an active way to counter Russian aggression and to support our Ukrainian friends. And we had a very successful meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have further such meetings in the course of the next few weeks.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by joining the Prime Minister in his remarks in relation to the honourable member for Bridgend? Does the Prime Minister still think that he and the Chancellor are tax-cutting Conservatives?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly do, because this is the government that has just introduced not only the biggest cut in fuel duty ever, but the biggest cut in tax for working people in the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. 70% of the population paying national insurance contribution will have a substantial tax cut as a result of what the Chancellor did. And if you take together, they don't like it, Mr. Speaker, it's true. They always put up taxes, that's why. They cut taxes. They love it. They love putting up taxes. But if you take together what we're doing with income tax and national insurance, it's the biggest tax cut proposed by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, for 25 years.
Keir Starmer.
Cut the nonsense and treat the British people with a bit of respect. Let me take him through this slowly. 15 tax rises, the highest tax burden for 70 years. For every £6 they're taking in tax rises, they're only handing £1 back. Prime Minister, is that cutting taxes or is that raising taxes?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know where he's been for the last 2 years. But even by the standards of yes, he has. Even by the standards of Captain Hindsight, Mr. Speaker, to obliterate the biggest pandemic for the last century from his memory, to obliterate the 408 billion that we've had to spend to look after people up and down the country is quite extraordinary. And this is a government that is getting on with reducing the tax burden wherever we can. What we are doing, Mr. Speaker, there's one measure I think he should be supporting, and that's the health and care levy, Mr. Speaker, to fund our NHS. That's the one they oppose, Mr. Speaker. Every other tax rise, they're all in favour of.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I can only hope that his police questionnaire was a bit more convincing than that. This year, British people face the worst fall in living standards on record. While they're counting every penny, the Prime Minister is hitting them with higher taxes. But in 2024, when there just so happens to be a general election, they will introduce a small tax cut. That's not taking difficult decisions. It's putting the Tory re-election campaign over and above helping people pay their bills. How did he find a Chancellor as utterly cynical as he is?
Prime Minister, what we have, Mr. Speaker, is a Chancellor who took the tough decisions to look after the UK economy throughout the pandemic, who protected people up and down the land with £408 billion worth of support, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, if we listen to them, if we listen to Captain, this is the truth. If we listen to Captain Hindsight, we would not have come out of lockdown in July last year, Mr. Speaker. We would have stayed in lockdown over Christmas and New Year, Mr. Speaker, with the result that the UK economy would not be growing in the way that it is, and so we would not be able to make the investments that we now are. And under Labour, we would have to tax more and borrow more, and they cannot be trusted, Mr. Speaker, with the economy.
Keir Starmer.
The tough decisions. Give me a break. We know, Mr. Speaker, we know who those two always ask to pay. Income stealth tax, a tax on working people. Tuition fee raid, a tax on working people. National insurance hike, a tax on working people. All while oil and gas companies see unexpected bumper profits. A windfall tax would raise billions and ease the burden on working people. Mr. Speaker, the former CEO of BP, Lord John Brown, says a windfall tax is justifiable. The current CEO says they have, in his words, more cash than they know what to do with. Why is the Prime Minister more interested in shielding oil and gas profits than supporting working people?
Mr. Speaker, it's a classic example of what Labour has got wrong in their period in office. The oil and gas companies are now investing £20 billion, Mr. Speaker, in ensuring that we have long-term energy supplies. And I remember the 1997 Labour manifesto actually said that there was no economic case for more nuclear power. We are now having to make good the historic mistakes of the Labour Party by investing in our long-term energy supply. That is what we're doing. Everything that they are proposing would mean deterring investment, meaning higher prices for consumers and households up and down the land being worse off.
Speaker, there we have it. They're the party of excess oil and gas profits. We're the party of working people. Mr. Speaker, talking of parties, Prime Minister, he told the House no rules were broken in Downing Street during lockdown. The police have now concluded there was widespread criminality. The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead the House should resign. Why is he still here?
Hang on a minute. He's just changed his position. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we do at least expect some consistency from this human weather vane. It was only a week or so ago where he was saying that I shouldn't resign. He's got to make what is his position, Mr. Speaker? Of course the Met must, the investigators must get on with their job. But in the meantime, In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our job, and what we are focusing on is tackling the cost of living, helping people through the spike in fuel prices, the 9.1 billion that the Chancellor has set out, but also, Mr. Speaker, I've mentioned nuclear power, I've mentioned tackling our energy supplies, which Labour totally failed to deal with. What we're also doing, far more important perhaps even than that, Mr. Speaker, we're tackling illiteracy and innumeracy in our schools. And I think we're investing billions in tutoring, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're focusing on, and I think that's what the people of this country want us to focus on.
Here's Starmer.
Look, there are only two possible explanations. Either he's trashing the ministerial code, or he's claiming he was repeatedly lied to by his own advisers and that he didn't know what was going on in his own house and his own office. Come off it. He really does think that it's one rule for him and another rule for everyone else. That he can pass off criminality in his office and ask others to follow the law. That he can keep raising taxes and call himself a tax cutter. That he can hike tax during a cost of living crisis and get credit for giving a bit back just before an election. When is he going to stop taking the British public for fools?
Mr. Speaker, this is the leader of the opposition who would have kept this country in lockdown and made it absolutely impossible. He has zero consistency on any issue, Mr. Speaker. But one thing we know about is he would like to take us back into the EU and take us back into lockdown if he possibly could. Thanks to what this government has done, we have unemployment back down to the levels it was before the pandemic. The economy bigger than it was. We have record vacancies, Mr. Speaker. The difference between them and us is they want to keep people, Mr. Speaker, they want to keep people on benefits. We want to help people into work. And that's what we're doing in record numbers. They want to raise taxes. We want to cut taxes. And that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And we're tackling illiteracy. They didn't give a damn, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on with making this country the best place to invest. Last time I updated the House, Mr. Speaker, on the number of unicorns that we had of unicorns in this country. That's tech countries worth more than $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. I said we had 100. I can inform you now, Mr. Speaker, that we now have 120. They don't want to hear it, but let me tell you, that's more than France, that's more than Germany, that's more than Israel, it's more than France, Germany, Israel combined, Mr. Speaker. That's what's happening under this government. That's what's happening because of the tough decisions we've taken. We take the tough decisions, we deliver, they play politics, Mr. Speaker.